And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Wednesday afternoon lunchtime show, and we're going to be talking about everything happening in rugby at the moment. A couple of things to talk about. The main thing we'll be talking about is the Springbok side that has been named to face Australia on Saturday, and the reaction that we have seen towards it. We'll also be talking about a couple of other things. For example, going to be talking a bit about Lua Diaga and the injury that he faces. For example, we're going to be talking a little bit about the rugby qualification for the Rugby World Cup, as well as taking a bit of a look at the Curry Cup for this weekend as well, and kind of give you a bit of a Curry Cup update. So lots to talk about and lots to get through. We've got a poll in the comments asking, is the Springbok team named by Rassie Erasmus disrespectful to Australia? And the reason I put that poll out is because that has been some of the reaction towards the team that has been named by Rassie Erasmus, and we're going to talk about whether that reaction has any justification, has any legs. Is the reaction and justified? Is it potentially a disrespectful team in inverted commas, or is it just a rotational side? And at the end of the day, coaches have every right to make the decisions that they make, to name the sides that they want to name. And if Rassie Erasmus wants to make these changes, he's got the license to do that. Because 2 years ago, we saw a similar thing. We saw a completely rotated side take on Wales during that sort of three-man test series. We rotated for Bloemfontein. We actually ended up losing the game. Very, very close. We ended up losing the game. And there was a big reaction against Jacques Nienaber, who was the coach at the time. We then changed our team and we beat them in Cape Town, and we ended up winning the series 3 points, 3 matches to 2. The first one actually also went down to the wire. David Willemse having to kick that last-minute penalty to get us that victory. So at the end of the day, when you look at these selections, you've always got to look at the long-term plan, for example, and what the long-term plan is, and why we are making the selections we're making, why have we gone with these rotations, and what is the thinking, and what are the benefits, what are the potential issues, for example, because this can become a bit of a banana peel. If, for example, we do lose this weekend, then there'll be a lot of pressure on the Springboks to go and win the Rugby Championship, because if we look at the draw, for example, in the first round, then it's ours to lose now, really. 5 points out of possible 5 so far. We beat Australia this weekend. If we were to beat them another bonus point, it'd be 10 from a potential 10, and a minimum of about 5 points ahead of, for example, the All Blacks. If Argentina were to beat the All Blacks twice, then Argentina would suddenly become big contenders for the Rugby Championship. I would, however, be quite surprised if they weren't to manage to beat them at Eden Park, a stadium and a venue where the All Blacks have not lost a game since 1994, I think it is. It's like about 50 years they haven't lost at Eden Park. So they've got a terrific record over there. Let's have a look at some of the comments saying, and let's get stuck into the disrespecting Australia, because Wallabies themselves have responded as well, to be fair. Wallaby Lakan Salakaloto gave a bit of interviews on the channel itself, and you can go and check it out. And he was also asked about the side, and do they believe that they're being disrespected, for example, playing against a boxed B team. And I think he actually responded very, very well, to be fair to him. I think that he summed it up really. And he spoke about how good the side still is, despite it being so rotated. So this is what Lalakai Soto had to say. He said, if you look at the team, there are 14 World Cup winners and only 2 guys that are new caps. New caps being starting, by the way. Nobody in this weekend is actually uncapped. So this is not disrespect to Australia, and this is not us feeling nonchalant about the game. He said that it's no disrespect at all. They've still got 14 World Cup winners in their squad. Their depth is a big reason why they're back-to-back champs. The challenge for us is to come in and put in a much better performance than last week. Their game plan hasn't changed over the past 8 years. The challenge is, how do you stop that? And can you stop that? I will beg to differ. It has changed over the last 8 years. And if you don't think it has, then you're not paying attention. We definitely did not play the same in 2023 as we did in 2019, and we're certainly not playing the same this year than we did to last year. We are evolving. Obviously, there are still sort of fundamentals which remain the same, and you want to play to your strengths, for example, but there have definitely been differences. He spoke about the performance and he said that as players, we weren't good enough. He said there were some lessons learned. It's been a tough week for us. We're looking to do more of our game plan this week and put in a performance our fans can be proud of. We've just got to do our jobs better individually and collectively. The responsibility is on us as players. We've got the right framework and game plan to take it to these guys. Now, take it to us is what I suppose most fans actually want. We want to see a competitive game. We want to know that if we're beating a Wallaby side, it's a decent Wallaby side. Because the problem is, most of the reaction from last week has been, yeah, but it's not a particularly good Wallaby side. And you kind of sit there in between going, it's a good performance, it's an ordinary team. How good a performance is it because of the ordinary team, etc., etc. No one was going to raise questions about the performance against Ireland because you know how world-class of a team it is. Australia have not quite earned that right yet to be called a world-class side. They're not at the moment. They're just not at the end of the day. So that's also something that we want to see. Hopefully we do see improvement from Australia because we want to be playing against the best possible players and best possible teams all the time. So it's an interesting one. But let's have a look at some of the comments. And Jean is saying, I'm no fan of these wholesale changes, but it's no disrespect to Australia. Jan Fluter says that we'll still beat them, so no disrespect. They disrespect us by kicking us out of Super Rugby. No love lost there. Michelle saying it's not Bok's fault. Other countries don't have as much depth as SA and are unable to put forward two strong packs, both able to win the championship. Mark Casey, one of our members, saying 5 Bulls in the pack is a good initiative and reference the Bulls win over Leinster pack. Leon J. Baer is saying, I love the move towards a more expansive type of 12. It's hard to justify selecting anyone over a Damon Delendi or Andre Esterhuizen. But if we are looking at the guys next in lines, it's Willemse, Sasha, Jordan Hendrickse. Very, very interesting concept, this whole idea of a more expansive game plan and therefore having a more an inside centre, for example, in Nakazakanya who's more suited traditionally for sort of his distribution. And I think we're going to see a lot more of Jesse Creel. Sort of filling in that sort of crash ball type of option in the midfield because he's probably a lot more powerful as a crash ball than the Kanya is. So that's also going to be an interesting thing in regards to how we are going to adapt and how we might start playing, which might be slightly different. Jean saying, on a side note, I think Nokia could struggle to start at the Bulls. Visa is an enforcing bruiser, and Manjesi reminds me of Itoje with more defense and physicality. Add Jay van Heerden and for Mark Trouble. Well, it's a nice problem to have for the Bulls. I mean, he is basically probably going to be their captain next season, so I'd be surprised if he's not starting, but it'll be good for the Bulls to have that kind of depth and the competition. Injabulu is saying, can I ask how this is any different than when the Springboks used to split the squad and send the first team to play New Zealand and the B team would play Australia at home? Is it because it's away? I don't think it is very different, to be perfectly honest. But to be fair, I think that there was those criticisms at that time as well. I think that even then, people talked about disrespecting Australia and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a yawn rhetoric, to be honest. I think it's something that happens every single time you rotate. And it's one of those things where if things go well, then you sit there going, look how incredible our depth is. If things go badly, it's, oh, well, that's what you get for setting up a B team. There is definitely a lot of value in what we're going to see this weekend. Twofold. First of all, we do get to try new players. We get to sort of expand that depth, and we get to get a bit of information on some of these players and where they are, where they fit in. For example, are they ready for Test rugby? Another very interesting part is we get to play these players in Australia where the 2027 Rugby World Cup will take place. So in terms of giving an opportunity to play in conditions that we might see at the World Cup, yes, not quite the same time of the year. World Cup will be sort of more September, October, even November. But it does expose them to playing in Perth, where we could play in 2027 and playing in front of an Australian crowd, for example. And, I don't think it's a huge thing to be able to experience that, but it's definitely like from a mental perspective, you're going to be sitting there in the change and saying, right guys, this is our World Cup preparation start. We're going to be back here in 4 years time. This is where we're going to play a lot of our rugby. Let's get used to it. So mentally you're now thinking, all right, cool, this is not going to be a strange place to come into in 3 years time. We're going to be used to the conditions. We're going to have that opportunity that other teams won't have to play quite a few times in Australia, because chances are we'll play at either one or none next year, then we're going to play 2 the year after, and then play at least 1 the year after. So we'll probably play another minimum three tests in Australia in the next after this. So we're going to have another opportunity. We're going to have plenty of opportunity for these players to play in Australian conditions where the next Rugby World Cup will be. Leandre is saying, Money, in my opinion, is still our best flower half. Bars goal kicking. If we can have a 9, 12, or 15 that can relieve him of that responsibility, it'll be awesome. Who knows? Maybe Nahamba at 9. Victor saying, all the Springboks must get some game time, and how is Rassie going to know his best combinations? Alexander saying, I think it's completely disrespectful to possibly suggest that the team selected is not worthy of being Springboks. They are part of the Springbok squad and should all be fit to play. I think that's a very, very good comment and a very good point being made. Are any of those players in that team not worthy of playing for Springboks? I think the only question mark, well, not question mark, but the surprise selection of how much exposure he's getting is Jan Hendrik Wessels, given how little he's played in the URC level. But they really do rate him, and they're looking at 2027 thinking we can have a loose set that can play hooker, for example. That could potentially mean we could select somebody else, elsewhere in other positions. So if we can give him that exposure, we can see if he's going to be good enough. Then we know moving into 2027, we've got 3 years to put into this kid, who's then going to be sort of 24, 25, I think even 26 years old come the World Cup, and quite more progressed in his career, and be ready to get going. Daniel says, do you think Sasha moves to fullback in the later part of the game with Mani at 10 and Pollard at 12? I wouldn't be surprised at that at all. In fact, I did a video earlier on the Springbok flower half shootout, and I said I think we could very, very well see all 3 of them on the park at the same time in exactly that combo. Mani at 10, Honja at 12, Sasha at 15. Sasha will probably keep the goal kicking, but it would allow Mani Libbok to come on and do Mani Libbok things. Michael says, he says, we need to build a new team 2027 without rotation. There's no possibility. The other countries moaning have no depth and are just jealous. Leslie saying, Rassie has no responsibility for what Australia do. They must select their own team and leave us to select ours. MJ saying, thank you for Barker for giving us our 21st Rugby Championship. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Michelle saying, Australia should wait until after the game to complain about B team and A team as they complained before and ended up with egg on their face. Tia says, do you think we are jumping the gun on Hondre's replacement? He is only 30 and has won us 2 World Cups. Sasha has had 1 good season. Well, Sasha has actually not played that much this past season, to be perfectly honest, especially at 10. I don't think we're moving on from Andre Pollard. The fact of the matter is he has been named in most of the 23s. He started... was on the bench last week, on the bench this week. So I don't think we're moving past him. I'll be very surprised unless Sasha has a really, really good game again this weekend. My gut says we probably go with Andre Pollard against New Zealand. Although with the rise of Sasha, I'm starting to believe more and more that they might give him a go against New Zealand. But I don't think they're going to move on from Andre Pollard. I think that, especially not seeing him coming on at 12, for example, I think they will give more opportunities at 12 to see if that can potentially be a new role for him. He himself has said he doesn't really mind where he plays. If he has to play at 12, he has to play. He just wants to play. He wants to be part of the setup. He wants to be part of the Bok program and the squad. Darby says, can't compare this game to Wales and Bloemfontein. That Wake side almost beat up in Loftus, much stronger than Australia. Also played more Portugal and Wales in London, so much more prepared. Saying Estes messed up with a red card, should be him and in the midfield. And Zia says, is throwing 10 players in deep and actually giving young players an opportunity to show their quality when they don't have the combinations. Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the combinations are quite new. Ruan Nokia, Salman Murat haven't played before. That could very much be a long-term combination. A halfback combination, Moira van den Berg and Sashfami Gomezulu. Again, I think that could also be quite a good long-term combination. Lekanya JC Creel, that for me is a very interesting combination, because if it works, that adds a whole different, type of depth in terms of having Lekanya Damien Delendi, JC Creel as your top 3 centres, and then being quite almost sort of interchangeable in that you can have Damien and Jesse, Damien and Lekanya and Jesse, and you can kind of have a combination of those 3 with any, with all of them. So that becomes quite a nice position to be in, for example. Yassine says, Rassie isn't disrespecting Australia. The score on Saturday will disrespect Australia. Michelle saying, Hunter is not being replaced, but he went into 2023 World Cup with a problem at flower half. Rassie does not want this to happen again. Precisely. Super fun reaction says, missing a lot of caps in the scrum, and I'm not sure if Rassie understands this is a team game. MJ Douglas saying, can one of you sappers explain to me how Murat is your captain? He's going to dominate. He's going to get dominated in international rugby. I don't think he's going to get dominated, to be perfectly honest. I think he is a player who has yet to sort of smash the door down. I think he's got immense potential, and the Boks certainly see the potential in him. Stormers see the potential in him as well. I think he has been they're down with the number of injuries he's had recently, which has really prevented him from being able to sort of kick on and have the kind of the continuity he's needed. I don't think he's going to get dominated, for example. I think he's a very hard-working player. Is he an Eben Etzebeth? No, but no isn't Eben Etzebeth, bar Eben. So it's an interesting one. Video Vibe says, SA are not disrespecting Australia. They have a right to play whatever team they want. However, if they lose, they go second in the rankings and lose the title of best team in the world. It's a risk for SA. That says, Fassi is most under pressure player. If he makes errors, consequences are very high. Java says 10 changes is way too much. And Gradwell says most of these guys play fantastic in the URC. To give them a crack at the Wallabies is a reward for their persistence in the URC. Tend to agree. Again, you look at those players. Jan Koblar's been banging down the door for a while now. Thomas Toy had an immense premiership. Ruan Nokia, one of the top most consistent performers in the URC. Albert Lowe's had to really buy his time. Moy van den Berg, absolutely superb for the Lions. Apele Fassi, another fantastic season for the Sharks. And I'm just picking up the players who are kind of not block regulars in sort of the squad. Jan Hendrik Wessels again. Salman is a starter. He's the captain of Stormers. Has had his injury issues, but is the captain of the Stormers. So I think most of these players are playing week in, week out and have been really, really good in the URC. And as you mentioned, that's just kind of the reward for it. They've done the hard jobs, they've paid their dues, and now they're getting a chance. So at the end of the day, we are trying to build depth. But I think also, it's more than just building depth at the end of the day. I want players like BITDEFENDER is a terrible example. So I want players like a Jason Colby to know if he has 2 or 3 bad games in a row, there's someone who's sitting there saying, well, watch yourself, because I will come in and I'll take that opportunity and I'm not going to have 2 or 3 bad games in a row. I think that's, Jesse Creel, for example, he's playing like a player that knows the Kanya Amma's in the squad and wants his jersey back. He's every single time he goes out there, it looks like he's playing for, the game of his life to try and hold on to that jersey. And that's what you want to do, is you've got to keep the hunger in the senior players. You've got to make sure that these senior players are continuously trying to make sure that they keep their jersey and that they are actively trying to keep winning the jersey and keep winning favour, keep proving themselves to try and keep their spot in the squad and to make sure that we get as competitive as proper as possible. So Jonas is saying, if SA were losing as we did in S2017-8 and Rassie brought these changes, the nature of the debate would have been changed 180 degrees. Let the coaches coach, the players play, the spectators spectate. Well, that's exactly what we're going to be doing on Saturday. MJ saying, don't know, mate. Watched last Stormers URC games, and yes, his work rate is great, but even the URC got manhandled a couple of times. Should be fine, maybe as a 5, but not a 4. Well, let's see how he goes this weekend. He had that trust preventing tackle against Ireland, for example, was really, really good. Showed good physicality there. Evans says, in bigger matches, Willem or Sasha on the bench allows 6-2 or 7-1 split. Think that will happen for New Zealand. And Fassi a good season. Lev just said, I'm most worried about our front row. Australia is so sneaky at scrum time. These guys are in for a lesson they will not forget, which is the point, I guess. And Johnny's saying, mate, it's risky having so much inexperience at 9, 10, 11. Well, Sasha didn't look particularly inexperienced last week at 10. 11's a bit of a strange one if you're talking about Makazole Mapimpi, who's a double World Cup winner. So I'm not sure if you maybe meant 15 with Apele Fassi. Morne van den Berg's been around the block for a while there for the Lions. He's been and been one of the top stars. He's 26 years old, so he's not a 20-year-old kid. He's paid his dues. He's been playing for a while. He's a player that has lots and lots of seasons under his belt. So just because he doesn't have, so for example, Kane Moody has more Springbok caps, but is 5 or 6 years younger than him. Which is the more experienced player? So Morne van den Berg, who's played 74 matches in the URC for the Lions, URC and the EPCR. Is he more experienced or less experienced, for example, than Stash Magomazulu, because Stash Magomazulu has more test caps? So that's always an interesting thing, isn't it? And I'm not saying you're wrong or anything, but the idea of inexperience, is inexperience test inexperience? Is it playing inexperience? Who's more inexperienced? An older player has played more but not played international rugby, or a player who's played more international rugby but is younger and actually played less rugby. Clarify 7, 8, 9, 10. That makes a bit more sense. Albert Lowe. Look again, Albert Lowe. He's been around the block now. He's made his debut for the Boks 2 years ago. Actually, 24 years old. So. Again, I thought he had a really solid game last week. So the big sort of question mark, I suppose, probably is Morne van den Berg. But I think also, you're playing against an Australian side who's similarly quite inexperienced. Nick White's supposedly expected to come back this weekend. So that obviously adds a tremendous amount of experience. But Harry Wilson, for example, is the same age as Ulrich Lowe. Has played 12 games for Australia, whereas Ulrich Lowe's played, I think, about 4 games for South Africa. So similar sort of ages. Harry Wilson's got maybe more experience in South Africa, but also if you look at how many games you play in his domestic season, Ulrich Lowe has probably played more professional rugby than Harry Wilson has, because we play more rugby in a yearly basis. So it'll be interesting. If you look at professional games, probably very similar. So, those are sort of your matchups. Nick White versus Moni van den Berg, obviously very different in experience there. But Noah Lolesio, for example, is more experienced than Sacha Famigama-Zulu, but has been in and out of the Australian squad, was dropped, didn't go to a World Cup. So he's more experienced, but he's not tremendously experienced. Jake Gordon's got 20 caps for Australia, 31 years old. So Moni van den Berg's going to play a second game, so not nearly as experienced as Jake Gordon when it comes to test match rugby. Jake Gordon made his debut, 6 years ago? But again, has played close on 100 games of professional rugby. So it's about where these players can harness that sort of experience in non-test match rugby and bring it through. And I think that's where we saw like a Dion Fourie. Yes, he made his debut and it's got very few tests, but because he's been playing for so long, understands his game, understands what he's good at, understands what he's not good at, for example. And sometimes those older players who are more experienced domestically can really take a step into international rugby far easier because they've been playing for longer and they understand their game inside and out. You see a similar thing in cricket, for example. Players who understand their game and understand how things work sometimes make the step up a lot easier than players who sort of come in at a younger age who are still sort of not entirely sure about themselves. CS says, if things turn south for the young guys, they can make the back line 9 Williams, 10 Libbok, 12 Pollard, 13 and 15 Creel. Be very surprised if we see Creel go to 15, but in theory, we could do that. W says, Tank only one in tight 5. I'm confident in. Rest really need to step up. Still think we win. That bench will close out the game if it's close. Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that we do have so much experience on the bench. I think average is 52 caps on the bench. So we do have a contingency plan. We do have backups. If things are going badly, we can bring on those players and sort of sort that issue out. So you're going to sort of bury that over there. So I want to talk a bit about Lourdes de Jager. Now, earlier this week, Lourdes de Jager confirmed that he has sustained a shoulder injury, which has ruled him out for the rest of the international season, and we will not see him play rugby again this year. Very, very unfortunate for the Lock. And this has sparked sort of debates about whether he might actually be looking into retirement, because obviously he had the heart issue last year, now another injury. So let me look at it. So he was speaking on a podcast and he said that he tore one of his rotator cuff muscles in his shoulder pretty badly, saying it's off the bone. He then said, so the tendon has to heal and reattach to the bone. Time-wise, the doctors are saying 6 to 8 months. That would put us between December and February, earliest December, so I'll miss all the test matches for the Springboks this year. Hopefully, I will have another crack next year. So very frustrating from a Lourdes de Jager perspective, but I don't think we should be calling him for his time. He's 31 years old. He's won the World Cup. On his day, I think he starts for the Boks next to Evan as our best lock combo. So very frustrating for him to not be able to play this year. And again, this is why it's so important that a Ruan Okia is playing, because now you've got a Franco Mostert and a Lourdes de Jager, and I think Jean Klein's come back into fitness, but I had Arke Snyman all injured at the moment, which means we've got to look at other options. So Selman gets a chance and Ruan Okia gets a chance. That is about building depth. These players are not going to, if it's a World Cup final tomorrow and everyone is fit, Ruan Okia somewhere don't make that 23. But if there is an injury crisis and you go to a World Cup, you're not taking players who are brand new to the setup and never played Springbok rugby. So it is about coping with injuries, and when you can, it's nice to be in a position where you can give players chances when you want to, not because you have to. So I think Jason Dixon, for example, wouldn't be playing this weekend if we weren't for a niggle. But at the moment, we don't have to play Sacha at 10. We could play Pollard at 10. We could play Moni at 10. We don't have to play Salma starting at 4. We could have Eva starting at 4. We don't have to have Jan Henry Wessel starting at 1. It could have been Gerrit Stellenkamp, Oxen Chair. We are choosing to give these players opportunity to build that experience into them. And but yeah, so in terms of Lord Diaga, I think that calls for him to retire are really premature. At the end of the day, it was a contact injury. He had to overcome that heart issue, and when he was diagnosed with pericarditis, and had to sort of really work and he only made his return to rugby this year. He then got into some really good form, was playing really good, really well, and then got a shoulder injury in the final match of the game. Which has now ruled him out of the testing. So things aren't linked, for example, and I think it's frustrating when people look at isolated incidents and decide, well, he's just too injury prone, needs to retire. Very different types of injuries. It's not like it's a recurring injury. I think that's when you look to retire, or like concussions, for example. If you have 3-4 concussions within a space of like 2 years, or then you start thinking, maybe you're best to move on. Not the case with him. He's had different issues, so they're not necessarily linked, for example, and there's no indication that they will happen again. Dylan's saying, I think we will see Sasha move to 50 in the second half and then see Pollard at 12 and Money at 10. That'll leave the Wallabies to shreds. And CP Nunes saying, media always calls the team to address unnecessary headlines for media. It is not disrespectful. Well, the Wallabies said it's not disrespectful, so I think fair enough as well. Something else I wanted to speak about was the Rugby World Cup qualification. It has been confirmed there will be representation for all regions in the next Rugby World Cup. Some of the highlights of that is, first of all, the World Cup will take place on the 1st of October through to the 13th of November. It will feature 24 teams. So the first ever Rugby World Cup to feature 24 teams, the most ever. There will be 12 spots available from regional competitions, which will be played in 2025. A 4-team final qualification tournament played in November 2025 will see the last team qualifying, providing a compelling climax to the process. For the first time, all World Rugby regional associations have one minimum direct qualifying spot, and all teams will be qualified before the draw takes place. So, for example, we will have a team like a Canada, a States, for example, in the World Cup. So at the moment, 12 teams are already qualified. They are France, New Zealand, Italy, Ireland, South Africa, Scotland, Wales, Fiji, Australia, England, Argentina, and Japan. And 6 regions have one qualifying spot. So, for example, the Pacific Nations Cup is going to provide a spot, but that's even though it's cross-continental playoff and one final qualification tournament. And so in each region, teams will qualify as the following. So in Europe, there will be a Rugby Europe Championship 2025. The top 4 teams will qualify. The Rugby Africa Cup 2025 champions. So there will be at least one. So there will be an African team there, whether it's Zimbabwe, for example, Namibia, even Kenya making a bit of a comeback. It'll then be the Asia Rugby Men's Championship. Very exciting because that won't be Japan. So we will see potentially a different Asian side in there. South America, South America Rugby Championship will be the champions of the South America Rugby Championship will then make it to a spot. And the Pacific Nations Cup, which includes the US and stuff like that. Apart from Fiji and Japan, there will be 3 teams there that will potentially qualify. There will then be the South America Pacific Playoff, South America Championship runner-up against Pacific Nation Cup's bottom team, excluding the qualified teams, and the final qualification tournament. So the final qualification tournament will comprise of one pool of 4 teams playing in a round-robin format with the winner on competition points after playing all other teams qualifying for Australia. The 4 teams will be from the 3rd place in the South America Rugby Championship, the South America/Pacific Playoff loser. Obviously, the winner does get a spot, so the loser of the South America Pacific Place Playoff will go into that qualification tournament. The team that comes 5th in the Rugby Europe Championship, and the Africa/Asia Playoff winner, which will be the Rugby Africa Championship runner-up versus the Asia Rugby Championship runner-up. The winner of that gets a spot, and the loser goes into the final qualification tournament. So we might even see 2 African teams in the next Rugby World Cup, which is very exciting. In terms of that Pacific Nation Cups, the teams that aren't qualified yet: USA, Canada, Samoa, Tonga. So those teams all coming into potential qualification over there. So it's exciting. We could see a Kenya and a Namibia. We could see Namibia and Zimbabwe and South Africa all going to the next World Cup. We could see, other Asian teams going into the World Cup. We could be seeing Hong Kong, for example. Maybe they could potentially be going in. We might see maybe Korea come up. for example. So it would be quite cool to see another Asian side more than just Japan qualifying into that Rugby World Cup. So that is the latest when it comes to that Rugby World Cup qualification. Very different to what we sort of used to. And in terms of the new format, there will then be 6 pools of 4 teams. There'll be around 16 added into it. So you have to win an extra match. The tournament window will be reduced from 7 to 6 weeks, so it'll actually be a shorter tournament, and it'll be while promoting a rhythm that builds momentum across the pool phase and respects the minimum number of rest days between matches as at France 2023. Yeah, an interesting concept, the fact that they're adding an extra round, but the tournament itself is actually not going to be as long. We're only going to play 3 matches. I think we played 4. Yeah, so it's one pool game fewer, and then an extra round robin, because we played against Tonga, Ireland, Scotland, and Romania. We'll only play against 3 games, and then potentially go into round 16. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting format, but that is all going to be in 3 years' time. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, a big thing for that is the team like the States, who are hosting the next World Cup back in 2031. So a big opportunity for them to qualify and be in a World Cup before they then host the thing. But yeah, so we're going to wrap up there, people. Always nice to come and chat for a little bit. So if you're watching this afterwards, let me know what your comments are down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you guys